In this e-learning, we're going to show how the boarding module works and how to fix problems based on concepts and a few examples. This is a more advanced e-learning, and for that it would be really nice if you had the chance to first work a little bit with horses check-in, check-out, changing rates, and stuff like that. The board module is simple, and I promise that it is simple, but the number of variables involved in the process is what make it look complex. So it will look complex, but not because of how it works, but actually the number of those variables we need to take care of. The lack of maintenance makes things even more complex on human error. So when we forget to check horse in, when we forget to check a horse out, or changing the rate, so those things we should do throughout the period maintaining the boarding list are the ones that will make the boarding, working with the boarding module a difficult task. Let's consider a horse at a time, and let's talk about the variables involved in the process. The boarding module will consider the horse name, the rate, which can be either per month, a day or monthly rate, the arrival date, the new period date, and the charge date. Let's take a look at the program. And here in WISE option, we're going to open the boarding module. So when we have a horse in our boarding list, the program takes in account for that horse what the arrival date is, what the new period date is, the rate, and then the charge date we assign when we hit the button to charge the board. Because we can tell the program to charge up to a certain date, but we would like that charge to show in a different date. We're going to talk about that later. But the program will then get this, calculate the number of days, and then place a charge into the horse file as a procedure. Basically, the difference between the arrival date and the new period date is that in the very first month, the program charged the board for that particular horse, not for all the first month you use the system. But let's say that this is the first month a particular horse is in our list. The arrival date is an important date, and the new period date has to be considered as the same as the arrival date. Some places do not charge the first day. And if we have a arrival date, for instance, on the 13th, and also the new period date on the 13th of a certain month, we're going to calculate from that date. Next month, the new period date will be the first of next month. Therefore, the system knows that we should ignore the option to not charge the first day. And again, this is an option for those farms that do not charge the first day of the boarding. And then it will say, okay, this is not the first month, so the first day is not waived. We should charge the first day as well. And the charge date, like we said. I said the module is simple. How come? Well, because actually all it does, it creates a procedure or a charge for each horse in the list based on those variables. So the boarding list will be there, and based on those variables, it will then get the first horse in the list and perform the same thing. Calculate the number of days, see if it is per month or per day, and place a charge into horse procedures list. All of that will happen at the time you hit the button to charge the board. Let's look at the module and see how it works. Okay, back to the list. So when I hit this button here, and right now the button is not available because we opened the boarding module from the boarding button on the main screen. That button only lights up when we open the boarding module from the billing system, the billing checklist. Let's do that. I'm going to open the billing, and then I'm going to open the boarding. So as you can see, the board charge button is available. If I hit that button, it will do this. It will grab the first horse, calculate the number of days. In this case, we are assuming that we're going to charge by the end of August, because the new period started in August. We'll calculate the number of days. If this system is set not to charge the first day, and let's say that this horse had the arrival date and the new period date on the 15th, then it would not charge the first day, because it knows that the arrival date is equal the new period date. On the next period, on the other hand, the first day would be charged, because the system will then know, okay, this is no longer the first month for that particular horse. But for several horses, it's going to just repeat that. We'll grab the first horse, calculate the number of days, multiply by the rate, and place a charge into horse files for the procedure list. Then it grabs the second horse, does the same, and places the charge in the procedure. So the boarding module will repeat that for each horse in the list, charging those horses for you as if you were adding procedures and charging procedures into the horse list. Okay, let's get back to our slide. So in summary, the boarding module simply does what you would do if you were entering the charges manually. It will multiply the number of days on the board times the rate and then add a procedure, the charge, into the horse file. When we create an invoice for each horse, we are grouping a collection of procedures to an invoice. Therefore, those procedures are no longer available for change, for modification. That's when the things get a little bit complex before and after the charge. But just keep this in mind. Now, fixing the problems. Basically, we have two situations. When we fix problems prior to billing and when we fix problems after billing. How complex can it get? We might have just a few problems, just a few horses, a horse that we forgot to check in, a horse that changed ownership, or even a rate that has changed during the period, before the end of the period. We simply forgot to make that change. Or we might have a more complex case. For instance, several horses had a rate change and we simply forgot. Or the owner changed the price in that particular month and you didn't change the price of the rate before charging the board. So in this scenario here, we're going to need to work in a more in a broader way. We're going to use more massive actions in the system. We're going to talk about those. As you see, it is hard to get a straight answer on how to fix the board. And the idea in this e-learning here is to explain you, based on certain examples, how to fix and maybe you figure out your own way. Before billing, it's much simpler because we don't have invoices yet. Therefore, if we need to change a procedure that has been charged or added by the boarding module, it will be still free for modification. We can even delete that procedure, go into the procedure list for that horse, whereas if we do after billing, we first have to cancel the invoice in order to delete or modify the procedure. There's no change in the customer account before billing, whereas when we have the system billed, you will have to maybe print out a new statement, a new summary statement for that customer, because it will change the invoice, it will change the charge for the board. Therefore, you will need a new summary statement, otherwise values won't match. And the procedures, like I said, are still free, whereas in the after billing situation, the procedures are locked and not available for change until we cancel the invoice. So let's work with a few examples. As I said, it is not possible to predict every single case. So we will work with those most common situations. And then I hope you can get an idea and figure out a way for each particular case you have on your farm. The idea here is to have you able to figure out a solution to your need through a better understanding on how the boarding module works. Well, the first thing is, of course, as a matter of fact, the best time to fix board problems, actually they have not even become a problem yet, is before charging. But if we are talking about problems, it's because you already charged the board and you forgot something behind. You left something behind and we need to fix that. So sometimes we identify the problems prior to billing, but other times after billing. If we had double-checked or triple-checked the list, that would not have happened. Unfortunately, users learn that on a hard way and create methods to make sure that the board is in a good shape prior to billing. So let's charge the board and start with a few examples. I'm going to charge this, our month here. Although this e-learning has been recorded on the 19th, but I'm going to pretend that today is the 1st, okay? So I'm going to charge the boarding module. I'm going to say yes. Before checking, we need to check in, check out all the horse change rates, the warning here, trying to make sure that everything's okay before we charge this. It's a reminder. I have seen several times the user just hitting yes here and not reading the messages, but we are just trying to help you out here. Okay. The first question is, what is the last day of the period? We're going to talk about that later, and usually it's the last day of the month you are charging. Okay? And this confirmation here is about those moments when you don't know if the last day of the month is 30 or 31st. So you could get, let's say that I entered here, if I had entered 8:30, my next period would start a day after, so it would be 8/31st. This is just a verification, making sure that we correctly entered the last day of the period. And then, what is the date we're going to charge the board? Like I said, we are telling the system that we are going to charge by the last day of August, in this case here, 31st. But we need also tell the system when the procedures, what is the date for the procedures to be entered into the horse file. So imagine the situation when you are entering a procedure. You say, okay, this procedure has been performed today. So that's the date when the charge applies. Although today is the 1st, and in this example I'm pretending to be 1st of September, I want those charges to be entered as of 8/31. A confirmation. Sometimes users forget to enter dashes or slashes between dates, month, and year. That might cause a problem. Okay, 14 horses in my list. Like I said, it goes to each horse, calculate rate times number of days, and place in the procedure. All right, so now we have the new period date in this column as the 1st day of September. So I'm okay with my charge and the board has been performed. Some of the possible problems. Let's talk about the ones that happened prior to the billing. Let's say that I just charged the board and I was checking my list and say, oh gosh, I forgot a particular horse to be checked in. Let's do that. Okay, I'm going to close my board. I should be still there. I'm going to stay here and say, oh, I forgot to check in a horse. So now I will. Let's put this mare, and I'm going to choose a date. I forgot to check in this mare last month on the 7th. And the rate, let's say that she is a recipient mare, And the date is correct. Registered arrival. No comments. Okay, it's in my system. So now I have that mare. And if we look to that particular record, the entry in my list, this is the only mare that the new period date won't match to the others. So she is 8-7, while all the other horses are still 9-1. That means, okay, I'm going to stop for a second here and focus on this case. Let's say that this is the only problem I found in the boarding module. I could then go ahead and charge it over, because today is the 1st, and now I have 15 horses. But one of the variables that are really important in the charge moment is the new period date. As I have only one horse left behind, all the other horses in this list have their new period date as September the 1st. If I charge it again, by the end of August, it will charge only this particular horse. Why? Because all the other horses are beyond my scope. They are after the new period date starts, after the last day I'm going to be charging. Let's see that happening. I'm going to charge it again. 8/31. 9/1 is the next period. Same date to enter the procedure. Confirmation. And this time, only one horse. The reason? All the other horses had the new period date after 8/31. So the boarding module will ignore those horses. If you forget another horse, now that particular horse is charged, checked in, and we are doing this, of course, prior to doing the billing. We forgot to check out a horse. Oh, okay. This case is a little bit more complex. Okay, this horse is, Dakota is no longer here. And we forgot to do that. If I look at that horse file, let's take a look and see how that horse file is. Where is Dakota? I'm going to sort this here. And here's, let me take a look at that horse's procedures. Is this the horse? I think so. Or maybe this is not the horse. Let me check the list if I see inactive horses. Where is Dakota? Yeah, I was looking at the wrong horse. Actually, we had this horse here. Let me make this horse one more time as active. And I was looking at these springs for that horse. Okay, now we have Dakota here in my list. If we look at the procedures, we're going to see that in the past the horse had departed. For this example, that's the reason why the horse was not in my list, because in my previous e-learnings I was showing how to departure and the horse was set as inactive. So the boarding was charged, and that's what I wanted to show you. But I forgot to check out this horse. So this charge here is actually not proper. The first thing I'm going to do is to remove this charge. Are you sure? Yes. So I removed the charge. Okay. I'm going to return to my boarding list. And the previous, first I'm going to change the new period date, which should be actually change the new period date for a selected horse only. It was initially 8/1/2007. Okay, Dakota is now 8/1/2007. I'm going to check out this horse on 8/20/2007. Yes. No comments. Set as inactive. I'm going to say yes. Okay.
Strip the neck band. No. Okay. Do we want to build the procedures? No. Departure report? No. There are reminders? No. I will leave them. Checkout complete. Yes, I'm going to close the boarding module, and I want to look at Dakota one more time. She was set as inactive. Okay, and there she is. Let's take a look at her procedures. So now the board departure was set in her account. A summary of this, I changed the new period in the boarding module, deleted the procedure in the list for the whole period. The new period date was already changed back to 8/1, so I could go ahead and departure the horse on 8/20. So this is the way I found to fix a horse that I forgot to check out. Next case, let's see that a horse which rate changed prior to the end of the period. I already charted the board, but I forgot to change that horse. Well, kind of the same situation here. Let's grab a horse here that we are for sure, we have it for sure in our list. 625, 620, 6025, 6029. Let's look at there. Let's grab this one. It is as a recipient. Let's grab this one here. Hope. Okay. And I'm trying to grab a case here that you can understand better. And let's say that this one, well, the first thing we need to do is, okay, this mare was a dry mare. I'll take a look at my rates here. And I have a wet mare rate. And let's assume here that on the 25th, this mare Principal Pride. This mare became a wet mare on the 25th of August. But I already charged the board. First thing I need to do is to get that date back to change the new period date for that particular horse only. And it was 8/1/2007. Record updated. So she is now on 8/1, but still under a dry mare rate. And I'm going to do a board change. Important to notice that is that this button here should be used only for rate change when you do it at the right time, or, during the period. Do you want to keep going? Yes. So I'm going to say that mare became a wet mare on the 25th. Okay. She was initially as dry. She will become wet. And the rate will change on the 8/25. Rate change. Is the 8/25 the first day? Yes. Okay. So now she is 8/25/2007. Now we have to get back to that procedure list because we should have two charges on that Principal Pride. One was for the number of days in my first boarding charge, which is not correct. So I will simply delete this entry here. I'm going to remove. Yes. Okay. And this one refers to up to the 24th. Therefore, we should have another charge here from the 25th through the 8/31. Now, how do I make that happen? So I fix part of it. I go to my boarding module, and this is the only horse on 8/25. Again, I'm going to charge the entire boarding module one more time, and I'm sure that this will be okay because this is the only horse which date is prior to 8/31. So I'm going to say yes, yes. 8/31. I'm okay with that. That's correct. Charge date. Okay. Verification. Okay. Only one horse charged. So now principal pride is 9/1. And I should have 2 charges in her procedures list. Let's look at that. There we go. I'm going to open this first one, which charged from the 1st through the 24th for $13. And if I look the second one, it's going to charge the 25th through the 31st for $15. So this is the case when I forget to change the rate prior to the end of the period. What happens if we have an ownership change prior to the end of the period? Well, the same rule applies here as for here. And we have a specific e-learning only talking about ownership change. I strongly recommend that you watch that, but I'm going to perform this one here for you to see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to open this. I'm going to go to the boarding module, and let's say that Wildcat actually changed the owner on the 10th, but I charged the entire thing as far as the end of September. First thing, I will change that date to new period date back prior to charging the board. And this is very important that we print a list in your procedures on the billing day. It is really nice if you print the boarding list before you charge the board, so you can have that as reference always. This sample here it's an easy case because we had all the horses as 8/31, but you might get horses that arrived after the beginning of the period. So we brought that back. Would you like to close before charge? No, I want to charge this later. I'm going to open the Wildcat procedures. I also will remove that first charge, which is not correct. Okay, so now it's clean. I will then check out that horse on the 10th. The horse never left, but a suggestion we have when you have an ownership change during the period is to pretend for a second that horse left and got back right away. So we're going to check out that horse on the 10th. We're going to do the departure on this date, and Wildcat is under owner A still. The file, the register for the owner. Yes. No comments. Set as inactive. No. Charge. Do you want to bill? No. Departure report? No. Complete. Close? Yes. Okay. So now I look at Wildcat, and we have our charge at that date. What should I do next? I should bill this horse individually for Dina Roberts because the owner will change. And I'm going to charge this owner only this procedure on as of 8/10/2007. I'm going to create an invoice which closes. Do you want to print? No. Closes all the transactions I have for that horse under that particular owner. Okay. Now that I don't have procedures, I can go ahead and I will change Sally White is the new owner. I'm going to save that. So the horse is now under a new owner name. And finally, I will consider that horse as not checked in. I will check the horse in. Let me close that particular, and we are talking about checking on the horses. We are talking about Wildcat, and it's a stallion fee. I'm going to do that on, I said A10. Okay. And we have the stallion. Wise option always gives us the last rate. It was a stallion, and I registered as arrival. No comments. Okay. Same concept. The only horse in the list. I will now do this through the boarding, the billing and boarding. I'm going to charge all the horses again, and I feel safe here because this is the only horse that which date, new period date, is prior or less than 8/31. Okay, I'm okay with that. Same dates, last day. One horse charged. Okay. Now, when I build this horse, because the ownership for this horse is to a different owner, the procedure this time, from the 10th through the 31, the invoice will go to that particular owner. All right. And this is the way we do the ownership prior to the end of the period. Okay, back to our slide. Several horses under a wrong rate. Let's say, for instance, just the price changed. The owner changed the price in the boarding module and forgot to tell you. So we could change all rates at once and say, okay, change the new period date for all horses. Although this is not good because, like I said, you might have a few horses here that could have arrived on the 10th. So this might not be a good case. Because you forgot, that's going to be a little bit harder, but you would have to change the arrival, the new period date for all those horses. Let's say, for instance, all the recipients. And if I click here on the description, I can have the horses sorted by the rate. And I would have all my recipients. I would have to change the new period date for all my recipients. And as only those recipients are prior to 8/31, I could charge the boarding module again. But before charging, I could go ahead and, using the rates, I would select the recipient rate and I would perform an update for that rate. This way, when I return to my boarding module from $10 to $11, for instance, they would be under the right price, the correct price, and then I could go ahead and charge the board because only those 3 recipient mares would get charged after my correction. Let's get back to our slide. Now, actually a different rate. Let's say that we have several horses. We have seen cases in which a customer, changes a bunch of yearlings or weanlings to yearlings or yearlings to 2-year. They have prices ranging on the age of the horse. So in this case, again, you would have to return the new period date as you have in your first list when you print it off in your checking procedures. You would return to that new period date. You would individually change the rate by using this option here from a weanling to a yearling or yearling to 2-year-old, so on. And you could charge the board again and finally go into the horse file and deleting that very first charge which was placed when we were charging the August, that our very first move we did in the system. Okay, so these are a few problems that might happen prior to the billing period. Let's move on to post-billing period. However, we have 2 moments here. before you send your statements out and after sending the statements out. We're going to see that the sooner you catch those problems, the better. And the reason for that is because if you still have the statements, and here we're going to talk a little bit more complex stuff because we have already invoices and customer statements printed out. If they're still on the farm and you have not sent those out, it's going to be less complex because once the customer receives, they will have invoice numbers, and when you cancel these statements, the system simply lose those numbers, and you're going to get new invoice numbers. But let's say, for instance, we have not sent the statements out yet, and sometimes happen that people, go straight to the billing procedures in the program, not following the checking list. They come here to the billing module, don't follow this checklist, and just go ahead here to the very last one, and boom, they go and charge. And say, oh my gosh, I forgot to charge the board. Well, for that situation, you would have then to, use a feature that you need the administrator password, and you could go here and delete all the invoices in a massive way. This is a more drastic change in the system, so it's really good to be careful as much as possible, as many times as you can. Create your go back points, so you're going to be helping us to help you in case something goes wrong. But this is what you could do. You could say, I know where the mistake is. I simply did not charge the board, and I have this bunch of invoices here in front of me. I want to get rid of all those invoices and simply charge the board and start over. So for this case, you can come here. You're going to need the administrator password, delete all the invoices created for a certain date. Then you go to the boarding module, charge the board, and bill it over. When you bill it again, the board will be charged. Board rate wrong for several horses. When you have the board rate wrong for several horses, it might not be the case to cancel all the invoices. You're going to have to make your own assessment in this case because it depends. If we are talking about 150 horses, maybe you should go ahead and cancel all the invoices like we mentioned in the previous case. But if we are talking about 15 or 20 horses, it is maybe the case for you to fix one at a time. You would have to go to the customer account, cancel the invoice. This way, you could delete the procedure in the horse procedure list, and after that you could then change the date or the rate in the boarding module. Do that for all those horses, changing the new period date. When you cancel all the invoices, cancel all the procedures, and have all the new period dates back to its initial status, you may go ahead, charge the boarding module again. And we have two options here. You could either bill each horse individually to create a new invoice for each horse. And if you are sure that those are the only horse and the only procedures entered after you cancel all the statements, you may go ahead and use the billing system to create invoices to all horses, because only those procedures will be for your next loop, billing the horses. Okay, next we're going to talk about board charge date wrong for several horses, which is the same as the board billing date. In other words, when you set up the date for charging, and this usually happens for those, especially training facilities that charge the month in advance. If you charge a month ahead, usually they mess up with the date and forget to do that. So in this case, it would be a good idea post-billing, but statements is still not sent out. And we are going to fix, actually, those two lines talk about the same thing. But we're going to cancel all the invoices, return the dates, the new period dates for all the horses we need to fix, and we have to start over. Literally, we have to. This is going to be a harder way to do, but unfortunately, the billing day was wrong. Otherwise, you will not catch. You're going to understand that better because later I'm going to talk about how to charge the month in advance. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. Reports at the end of the period. Well, there is a simpler way. Let's see first the summary for this. Only charts performed through the boarding module will be present in the reports at the end of the period. And let's take a look at the program. Some people go ahead and do all that change, and before coming here to the boarding module and using the button to charge it over, they simply do the entire thing through the procedure. So they come here and say, okay, it was not the 31, it was not the 7. Actually, this was on the 8th, and instead of 24, this should be 23. Will this work? Well, yes, it will work because you're changing the thing manually, but the boarding log will not match to this. You're doing a manual change. When things are, and I'm going to show you that later, but the real thing is that the problem is when they remove this procedure and actually add a manual procedure here for board. And they go and say board training and calculate the things here. Well, the charge will be in the invoice anyway, and that's fine. However, we have a report that maybe we're already familiar with this report. Reports for the end of the period. And one of the items in this list is to have, let's find it here, list of boarding. This is what I'm talking about. The summary by rate. If you go ahead to the horse file, make your changes and modification manually in the board module, and then you go to the horse file and also perform some changes in the procedures, not changing the procedure itself, but actually removing the procedure and adding a new procedure. That procedure you manually entered to the horse will not show in your summary for the boarding when printing off the reports for the end of the period, because only the procedures created by the boarding modules will be caught by this report. So keep in mind that if you want to change something, that's why I'm showing you that you should come here, change the new period date through this option, and then you have a few horses that are not in the last day. You charge it over. We are making sure through these steps that the procedures entered into the horse files were entered by the boarding module. Therefore, they will be present in the reports at the end of the period. Now let's talk a little bit about charging the board a month ahead. So like I said, some facilities charge a month in advance, training facility usually. Okay, here's the situation. Let me open the calendar for this example. And let's say that today is the 1st. I'm going to use this calendar just trying to make things a little bit clearer, but it's really hard. Today is the 1st. We are going to bill August, but our board, we charge the board a month ahead. We're going to charge in advance before the period. So although our procedures are up to 31st in August 31st, we want to charge board by the end of September. Let's do that. We go to the boarding module, and the last period was charged until the 1st. Actually, I need to go through the billing because the charge button is not available through that. Again, today I'm assuming today is the 1st of the month, and I'm going to charge this. I already review my list. I'm sure that all the horses were checked in, checked out, board rate changes, all of that. Ownership changed for those horses that changed owners in the middle of the period. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm done with that. Now, the last day of this period, although we are closing August, because we charged the month in advance, I'm going to say that it is 9/30/2007. When I click OK, so the new period in my boarding list is going to be 10/1. Am I okay with that? That's good. So now is the tricky part for those using training, because we are charging the board until the end of September. However, we are closing our period for the month of August. Therefore, we need to set that charge date not as the last day. This is the common mistake, and this is what I was telling about when several horses have the charge or billing date assigned by mistake for a wrong date. Okay, so this should be actually 8/31/2007. Again, the board calculation will be from 9/1 through 9/30. However, the charge, since we are still closing August, will be entered as a procedure into each horse file in my boarding list, for each horse in my boarding list. But that procedure date will be as 8/31. So when I create my invoices for that period, the period of August, I'm going to catch all the board that I charge for the month of September. So the date is now correct, and 14 horses have been charged. Let's get that 723 for us to take a look at the procedure list. 723, look at the procedures. So, of course, this was from our previous example, but look here. This is the difference between the new period date, which we are saying that the period is going to be charged by the end of September, and the charge date, which should be 8/31. When I do that, I am charging the month of September for board, but I am placing this procedure on 8/31, and that procedure will be in my invoices when I'm billing procedures by the end of August. Let's return to our slides. So the summary is, remember the difference between the last day and the board charge date. Checkout prior to the new period date will place a credit into the horse procedures. So that's saying that if any horse in my boarding list, since the new period start on 10/1, now I'm going to again play with the time and say that the 7023, this mare is a recipient. Let's say that today is the 15th, and I'm going to check out this horse. Okay, 9/15/2007, the horse left. Are you sure? Yes. It is telling me, well, you already charged the board until the end of the month of September, and this horse is leaving prior to the end of the month. Therefore, we might need to put a credit into that horse account, and this is what it's doing. Comments? No. Set as inactive? No. So I can see the list. Neckband, keep the same. You want to bill? Nope. Departure report? Nope. Reminders? Nope. And checkout complete. Yes, close it. 7023. So I see my list of procedures, and I see that I have a charge that initially was from 1 to 30 of the month of September, 1st to the 30th. And this one is going to be, okay, retroacting from October 1st to the 15th, and instead of a charge is a credit into the horse account. Okay, let's close this. Back to the slides. Okay, so these are the two main things you have to keep in mind when you charge the month, in advance. We are showing this e-learning using the version 3.1.33, and up to this version, it's not possible to have both situations: horses that you charge after the month and horses that you charge before the month. So you have to pick one of those if you're going to charge one or the other. And let's keep in mind also the boarding tools. This is a nice place for you to go, and during the period, let's say it's a place for you to maintain your boarding list. Other than you can check horses in, you will check horses out, change the rates. But when you do something wrong, this is what you should use. Those are the options available for you to fix problems. You can change the arrival date. You can set up a new period date only for a particular horse. You can change the new period date for all horses. And you can make a manual change to a particular horse. But in this case, we are considering that the two things were done wrong: the rate and or the date. So this is the option you should use for that. And this last one is a very nice one. You simply entered the wrong horse in the boarding module. And some people go ahead and check that horse out. But what happens when you check a horse out is that, especially if you don't maintain the same date, there will be a charge, a procedure into that horse, entered into that horse list of procedures. And at the end of the month, you might, printing out your statements might raise questions about that charge that's in the horse file, and which is not proper. By using this option here, you delete the horse from the boarding list. You simply take the horse out of the boarding list, and the horse will no longer be in the list, nor a charge is placed in that horse file. Then we have the board log. Every time you work with the boarding module, either checking horses in, out, changing rates, setting up new period dates, new arrival dates, that will register into a boarding log. Each horse in the system has its own boarding log. So when you click on each horse, if you double click here, you're going to see the boarding log for that horse. As default, it's going to open with arrival and departures only, or you could choose, okay, I want to see all events in this log, and that will show not only arrival and departures, but also when you charge, every time you charge the board, rate change, when you delete the horse, everything that you do in the boarding module will be registered here. Okay. Now, the boarding module, the more you practice, the better you understand the boarding module. It's using, that's the way you're going to be savvy. Checklist. Visiting a few farms, we saw that we have our checklist in the billing day. But it is really nice if you, put yourself a list of things you should check before hitting certain buttons, because that's going to save you, several hours sometimes due to, simply not double checking things in the system. The sooner you catch a problem, the easier it is to fix a problem. Massive changes after statements out is usually not a good option. This is really serious. Let's say that you chart the board, you create procedures, and then you create statements through the billing. Let's look at the program to visualize a little bit of this. Okay. We came here, we chart the board, and then we did all of this and that, charge service fees, and we go ahead and we build the procedures. We print our statements, we send all those statements to the customers, and then later we identify a big mistake for several horses. And I want to come here. Before coming here, I would like to cancel all the invoices for all customers, for all horses, and try to fix my boarding module by utilizing one of the massive things like change all the massive new period. Well, that might be a big problem because depending on the number of customers you send invoice, remember, every time you cancel invoice, you cannot use that number again. So a new invoice number for the same period, the same statement, might cause a huge confusion for your customer, and you might get lost very easily in the boarding module and doing this. Boarding is harder than people think. The board module, how it works, it's very simple, it's straightforward. However, like I said, the number of variables involved in this process and the number of check-ins, check-outs, rate changes, ownership changes, you charge the month before the end of the month, you charge in advance, you have all those variables going on, especially if you have different people handling with those check-in and check-out. So although the board module is a simple tool to use, the variables involved in this process is really complex. So be systematic, methodic, create your checklists, follow those rules, and everything should be just fine. So today we learned how the boarding module works and how to fix problems based on concepts and examples for the boarding module in WISE option.